return migration. Somebody is returning after they got migrated.
I think it's called remigration here in Germany.
If it's a safe country, I think it's a positive term for me. If it's free by will, not if you're forced to because of a country kicking you out.
I know that these situations doesn't come in a binary state.
Return migration is when a person moves from a host country back to their country of origin, nationality, or usual residence. Return migration can involve different procedures. Voluntary return, when a person chooses to leave on their own. Assisted voluntary return, when a person chooses to leave with support from the government or an organization. Expulsion, when someone is given an official order to leave the country. Removal, when that expulsion order is enforced and the person is deported. However, the legal and administrative language surrounding return is diverse, also encompassing terms like coerced return, pushbacks, refoulement, and readmission.
Return has taken a particular meaning and connotation in Europe, which actually means you're apprehended and then you're asked, do you want to cooperate and be returned, or do you want to be expelled?
We just hear forced returns and the voluntary returns, but whenever we say voluntary returns, we should be also really careful about it.
So, what do these terms and categories mean in practice?
There are different authorities, different entities who are involved with different data categories, and we try to cross-check all of them and try to make a meaningful analysis, which is really hard. We have to unpack the figures. We have to unpack the legislative frameworks to better understand the situation that migrants are facing.
Well, I have no idea. I could imagine that they're getting higher.
I would guess increase due to the newspaper coverage I've seen and to the immigration crisis we had.
EU authorities like Eurostat and Frontex track the number of return decisions issued and the number of returns actually carried out. According to Eurostat, EU member states issued a total of 3.9 million return orders over the last 9 years. The annual number of return orders has remained fairly consistent, with a slight decline during the pandemic years. However, the number of people who followed a return order has gone down. Only 1.2 million people in total actually returned. That's 1/3 of the people who have received an official order to leave. So, where does this gap between issued and actual returns come from?
One of the huge problems right now about the return is the lack of cooperation, right? In order to return someone, you have to coordinate and cooperate with the origin country. You rely on this origin country, and we see this lack of cooperation and coordination, which is a huge policy problem.
Over the years, the balance between so-called voluntary and forced returns has shifted slightly, with an increase in voluntary returns, defined as people who choose to comply with the obligation to return. The higher number of voluntary returns is largely due to EU policies that encourage migrants to return by offering incentives such as financial assistance, counseling services, or reintegration support in their countries of origin. While some migrants are given incentives to return, others are coerced to do so, to the point that they have no choice but to return.
Sometimes voluntary return seems like a voluntary return, but actually in practice, not. On the paper, they look like voluntary, they sign the form, but in reality, we need to understand the pressures behind.
If 100,000 individuals return to their country of origin. From the public opinion, this is a great number. This means that government is working, but public should be asking how it is being operationalized.
We need to acknowledge that there are very complex dynamics that make people really risk their lives to often to come to Europe. So we need to work on those rather than just mechanically returning people.
Return rates are often seen as key indicators of effective migration policies. But effective for whom? Researchers from the GAPS project are critically analyzing this approach to reveal the complex realities of return processes.